And the 2021 regular season has come to an end. We are about to head into the postseason, but before we do that, we need to go over what happened in the regular season. And the first thing on tap for that is the standings. As far as the AL Central, our Kansas City Royals finished the year at 88-74, which was good enough for first place in the AL Central. So we did win the Central and bypassed that wild card game, while the Cleveland Indians were 3.5 games back. They are going to be in the wild card game. As the rest of the divisions go, the AL East was the Yankees on top. The AL West was the Angels, followed by the Astros. The wild card in the American League is Houston hosting Cleveland. Texas was only a game out. Baltimore was only a game and a half out. And Boston was 3.5 games out. Moving on to the National League, the Nationals won the NL East. The NL Central was the Cubs, and then the Reds won the wild card. The NL West is the Rockies, and then the Dodgers in the wild card. So the wild card is the Reds hosting the Los Angeles Dodgers. Atlanta was 2 games out, and Arizona was 4 games out, which is a big thing, as we will get into a bit later on in this video. Now, taking a look at the award winners through the regular season, the AL MVP was Mike Trout. This is usually just the home runs award, so usually it doesn't really matter how good of a year a guy has. If they lead the league in home runs, it just gives them the MVP award. But in this case, it happened to be definitely the best player in the league, had the most home runs. Mike Trout led the league in home runs with 44. He had a 12-WAR season. That's pretty darn good for the MVP. The Cy Young was Corey Kluber. That's back-to-back Cy Youngs for him in 2021 and also in 2020. I believe he also won it in 2018, so I believe that's his 3rd Cy Young of this series alone. The AL reliever of the year also comes from the AL Central in Twins reliever Trevor Hildenberger. The rookie of the year comes from Billy Whitfield, the New York Yankees first baseman. And then the Gold Glove catcher was Wilson Ramos. He beat out Mabrys Valoria. The Gold Glove third baseman went to Matt Carpenter, despite him only playing against right-handed pitching and not playing the position after the deadline, because he was our third baseman only against righties, and then we picked up Matt Duffy on the deadline, so Carpenter moved to DH against right-handed pitching, and he still won the Gold Glove despite all that, because MLB The Show. The Gold Glove in center field went to Brett Phillips, so that's our second award winner. And then the AL Silver Slugger from the AL Central was Yoan Moncada of the Chicago White Sox. I'm just going to give you a little Yoan Moncada update here. His attributes are up on the screen right now. He is an absolute monster. And if the White Sox finally get their shit together in this series and you see them start making a run throughout the AL Central, he's reason number 1. As far as the National League awards go, the MVP of the NL was Corey Seager of the Dodgers. He had 39 home runs, which was first in the National League. Like I said, the MVP is the Home Run Award. Mike Moustakas was in the top 5 at home runs with the Diamondbacks, as he was tied for 3rd in homers. And then also a Diamondback won the Cy Young and Jacob deGrom. So they had a guy who had a very good season in Moustakas. They picked up Cespedes on top of their already good team. And they picked up Jacob deGrom, who won Cy Young, and they still did not make the playoffs. So just a tough year for Arizona. The NL reliever of the year was the New York Mets' Sean Doolittle, and then the rookie of the year was Brendan Rodgers, the Colorado Rockies shortstop, and that's mainly because they waited until he was an absolute beast to call him up. They waited until he was a legitimate top 10, possibly even top 5 shortstop to call him up to the big leagues, which is just dumb. And now we move things on to our players' stats. The best bat in our team, of course, was Jorge Bonifacio. He finished the year with a .902 OPS and 31 home runs. That was the 8th OPS in the American League. Jorge Soler had 34 bombs and an .831 OPS. He not only led Kansas City in home runs, he was also top 10, tied for 10th in the American League in home runs. Ryan Schimpf finished with a over 800 OPS and 819 OPS, 28 home runs. He couldn't quite get those 30 home runs, but he still put together a solid year for us. Over 800 OPS, 28 home runs. We still have him under team control. He'll be back playing second base for us next year, most likely. Matt Carpenter, an 812 OPS, 22 home runs. He had a solid year, you can't complain about that. 354 OBP leading off against right-handed pitching. Hit a few bombs for us, definitely a solid year for the veteran. Audrey Perez had an 812 OPS, 6 home runs, and 124 ABs coming off the bench, but he will not be on the playoff roster because he tore his ACL. And another thing, we will not have a backup catcher on the playoff roster because MLB The Show is dumb, and even though it clearly says someone's not allowed on the roster unless they're replacing an injured player, we have an injured player with a spot open. We cannot add the only other catcher on our roster onto the playoff roster because no idea. Can't explain it. But with the rest of our team, there is Matt Duffy, who finished with an 805 OPS, 25 home runs. That's a career high in homers for Duffy. He was a very good pickup at the deadline. I am definitely glad he is going to be back on our team next season. As far as where he stood in the league leaders, he had 199 hits, which was second in the American League, only behind Jose Altuve, who had just a measly 201, which is just a couple more. I shouldn't say measly 201, I should say he had a measly few more. That's not a measly few hits. You know what I'm saying. Altuve was in first, Duffy in second. Same deal with the at-bats. And then he was also top 10 in runs with exactly 100 runs scored on the season. Khalil Lee had a good year coming off the bench as the fourth outfielder, a 793 OPS, 9 home runs, and 290 at-bats. Solid year as the fourth outfielder. He has a legit shot to be the new right fielder in 2022, unless we sign somebody, but we'll see what happens in the offseason. Brett Phillips, also a pretty good year, 784 OPS, 13 home runs. He started off really slow, definitely picked things up as the season progressed. And then also he won the Gold Glove on top of that. He had 43 two-baggers, which was fourth in the American League. Brandon Crawford, a 764 OPS, 11 home runs. He did his job. Hopefully he'll be able to continue to be productive in the postseason as well. And then we dropped down to Pavin Smith, who had a 720 OPS, 15 home runs. Hit a few more home runs. He was stuck at 9 for solid 2-3 months, but still a very disappointing year from Pavin Smith. There's no other way to put it, just a bad year from our first baseman. And we also don't have Perez to play at first base in the postseason, so we're going to have to rely on Smith to hopefully turn things around and kick things into another gear for the playoffs. Marwin Gonzalez, just a bad year as our utility guy, a sub-700 OPS and 240 at-bats, just not a good year. He would be an option at first base instead of Smith, but then we'd have no backup infielder. Who can play second, third, and short, and then also he's been worse than Pavin Smith, so he's not really an option there anyways. Maybreeze Valoria, just a bad offensive season, a 602 OPS, 9 home runs. The guy just flat out cannot hit. And in this offseason, we're going to have to answer the question of, are we okay with subpar hitting at catcher and in return getting elite fielding, or do we want a guy who can hit and then at least have decent fielding behind the plate? Generally, I opt for the hitting route in that decision, but we'll see what happens in the offseason. Now taking a look at our pitching side of things, and for the Royals, Mark Leiter Jr., our best starting pitcher on the year, 168 strikeouts and 173rd innings pitched, a 3.01 ERA, 3.16 FIP, a 4.1 WAR. He was our best starter. He's proven to be one of the best starters in the American League in 2021. He was 7th in ERA. He was 3rd in WHIP. He was 1st in walks allowed. He was 6th in WAR. Very good year for the Toms River North native. Foster Griffin, also a very good year for us, definitely much improved from his 2 stints that he had up in the big leagues last year. His first full year was definitely a good year for him. He did a great job of limiting home runs given up as well. Chris Archer, he had a bit of a rough September. His ERA spiked a couple points, also his FIP. He still had a decent year, but not what you would expect from Chris Archer. Like I said in the August recap, I'm fine with him being what he is at this point, because even if it is a bad contract for him, that's one bad contract on an entire team. While the rest of the team is all cost-controlled young guys or guys under team control or just veterans on one-year deals that we don't have to commit to for long-term. That's generally how I like to run things, and that's what it is here in Kansas City. Jake Junis, He was also still solid for what he is. He's a 5th starter for us. He put up 5th starter numbers. I will definitely take that in our rotation. He was also 2nd in walks allowed, doing his thing where he doesn't walk anybody. But, I mean, he just got outshined in that category by Mark Leiter Jr., who did everything else well, and then also didn't walk people. Danny Duffy definitely had the worst year of his career in this series. He's usually our ace, usually our rock in that rotation, but he just was not that good this year. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't like our usual Danny Duffy that we expect to see. And he won't be re-signed in the offseason. This is the last year of his contract. We will be replacing him either through young arms if I decide to go that route, or maybe like a veteran on a 1-year deal. We'll see how we go in the offseason. Taking a look at our bullpen arms, we've got Brad Keller. Struck out 142 batters in 108 innings. He had a 4 ERA with a 3.22 FIP. Very effective relief pitcher for us. He struck out a ton of guys. He can go multiple innings and outings. Definitely like to see Brad Keller in our bullpen. Sean Gilmartin, 55 strikeouts, 48 1/3 innings pitched, 1.68 ERA, a 2.13 FIP. Those are impressive numbers as is, but they would have been even more impressive if he didn't miss like a month and a half, 2 months while on the DL with a fractured wrist, I believe is what he had. So, disappointed that he missed 2 months, but he's back for the playoffs, and he was still one of our best relievers on our team. Jose Torres, definitely a great year for our second lefty in the pen. A 2.30 ERA with a 3.39 FIP. Rafael Montero, not quite what he did in 2020 for us, but he was still decent enough, especially since he has that multiple inning potential in his outings. Juris Familia, solid setup guy for us, 44 strikeouts, 52 2/3 innings, 3.25 ERA, 3.11 FIP, solid year for the veteran setup guy. Orlando Meadows, definitely a good 37 1/3 innings pitched for us, struck out 48, 2.41 ERA, 2.54 FIP. Very good time for us in that limited time he had in the big leagues. He came up to replace Gilmartin when he got hurt, and he proved he belonged once Gilmartin returned as well. So Orlando Meadows on the playoff roster. Kelvin Herrera, 74 strikeouts, 66 innings, saved 40 ball games. Our fireball closer is still a dude. He was tied for 6th in saves in the American League as well. So as far as who we are taking on in the postseason, that would be the New York Yankees in the American League Division Series. Best of 5 series. We're taking on the team that has won a World Series in every year of this franchise series. Besides, I think, either last year or the year before. They've won it every year except for 1 year, which went to like the Astros or something. And when you match these two teams up on paper, it's definitely scary from our point of view heading up against this team. So our point of view is our rotation is going to be 1 through 4, Mark Leiter Jr., Chris Archer, Foster Griffin, Danny Duffy. My thought process was that is the series is going to start off in New York and the Bronx, obviously, and I don't want our lefties pitching against that stacked right-handed lineup of the Yankees in New York. I don't want that to happen, so we're going with Leiter Jr. and Archer, probably our 2 best starters anyways, to pitch in the Bronx, and hopefully those guys can get us into Kansas City and not be down 2-0 in the series. And then Jake Junis, of course, moves to the bullpen since we only rock 4 starters for the playoffs. And then, as far as our lineups goes against right-handed pitching, it's DH Carpenter, third base Duffy, left field Bonifacio, second base Schimpf, right field Soler, center Phillips, first Smith, shortstop Crawford, catching Valoria. Against lefties, it's a bit different. Duffy third, shortstop Crawford, left field Bonifacio, second base Schimpf, DH Soler, center field Phillips, right field Lee, first base Smith, and catching Valoria. Now the thing is where it gets scary. The New York Yankees roster. Their rotation 1 to 5, Luis Severino, Jordan Montgomery, Chance Adams, Robbie Ray, Justice Sheffield. Severino's the scariest. The rest of them are just kind of guys who get them along, but their bullpen is kind of absurd. Long reliever Chad Green. In the middle, they've got Trevor Rosenthal, Jonathan Holder, Hector Rondon. They have Chapman and Robertson as their setup guys, and they've got Zach Britton closing things out for them. They have the edge in the bullpen by far. And as far as their lineups goes, against righties, it's shortstop Tyler Wade, DH Jace Peterson, right field Judge, left field Stanton, catching Sanchez, third base Matt Davidson, first base is the Rookie of the Year Billy Whitfield, second base Gleyber Torres, center field Estevan Florial, and then against lefties, it's Billy Whitfield, Jace Peterson, Judge and right, Stanton and left, Sanchez catching, center field is Terrell McGraw, third base Matt Davidson, second base Gleyber, shortstop Denny Hechavarria. If you're wondering who Terrell McGraw is, well, look no further, right on your screen. The guy is a stud hitter with a lot of speed. They don't have any slacking parts in their lineup. Even Jace Peterson's been a very good player for them. That's why he's still on their team and all these championships. So it's definitely going to be scary heading into this series against the New York Yankees. Best of 5, first 3 wins the series, obviously. That's how best of 5 series works. I only play the elimination games, so when you see this next episode, it'll be whatever is the elimination game, whether we're down 0-2, whether we're up 2-0, whether it's Game 5, whatever it may be, that's what you'll be seeing. And with that being said, that's going to wrap things up here for this edition of the Kansas City Royals franchise. I've been your host, Jerseyborn, and I'm saying goodbye.